Imagine a giant who can, step over the Himalayas like they're just, well, like they're pebbles.
Right, just casually strolling over mountains.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
giant who can drain Niagara Falls like a bathroom tap.
Yeah.
But he is so profoundly bored by, I guess, the smallness of the earth that he just lies down and literally waits to die.
Which is such a dark, fascinating image.
It really is. But then on the flip side, imagine a tiny, like, half-inch man standing in your front lawn,
Yeah.
and he's looking up at the blades of grass as if they are this terrifying, endless, magical jungle.
Oh, yeah, convinced he's on the greatest adventure of his life.
Right. So the question is, which one of them is actually seeing reality?
It's a question that completely upends, how we measure the actual value of our experiences.
So, welcome everyone. You are stepping into the common room. We are broadcasting to you right from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas, Chesterton Radio.
And if you haven't visited us before, you should know that in this room, well, old books are treated as living companions.
Yeah, they aren't museum pieces locked behind glass. They're meant to be opened, dog-eared, argued with, and, ultimately understood.
Absolutely. So today, we're pulling up a couple of comfortable chairs and inviting you to join us for a deep dive into a collection of essays that, honestly, it might just change the way you look at the world around you.
It's always a privilege to be in the common room. There's this specific kind of warmth here, a recognition that the past has a voice that's often much louder and clearer than the constant exhausting noise of the present.
Exactly. And the voice we're listening to today belongs to G.K. Chesterton, specifically through his 1909 collection of essays titled Tremendous Trifles.
Now, our mission today isn't just to give you, like, a book report on a century-old manuscript.
Right. Nobody wants that.
No, we're here to use Chesterton's work to answer a very profound, very urgent question for you, the listener. And that is, why do modern people stop seeing the world?
Because we do, don't we?
We totally do. I mean, we look at things every single day, our commutes, our neighborhoods, our families, but we don't actually see them anymore. We've kind of gone blind to our own lives.
Yeah, we suffer from this kind of habitual blindness. It's actually a neurological and psychological reality. I mean, the more accustomed we get to an environment, the less our brains even process it.
Right, it just becomes background noise.
Mm.
So to help us cure this, we've assembled a really robust stack of sources for you today.
We're drawing upon biographical data from the Christian Classics Ethereal Library, which gives us this great timeline of his life and works.
And we also have rich contextual background from the Society of G.K. Chesterton. They're an organization that views him not just as a writer, but as a model of lay spirituality.
An apostle of what they call common sense.
Exactly. And of course, we are utilizing the full original text of Tremendous Trifles itself.
So for those of you who might be encountering him for the first time, Gilbert Keith Chesterton lived from 1874 to 1936.
And to say the man was prolific is, well, it's almost a comical understatement.
Oh, completely. He was an English essayist, a poet, a novelist, a philosopher, and, perhaps most famously, the creator of the Father Brown detective mysteries.
Yet during his lifetime, he published 69 books.
69!
With at least another 10 published after he died. It's insane. He was also a man of enormous physical size. He actually joked about his own weight quite a bit, and he had an equally massive intellectual appetite.
What I've always found fascinating is how he famously debated his friends, people like, H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw.
Right, and he maintained these warm, jovial friendships with them while vehemently disagreeing with almost every fundamental premise they held about reality.
That ability to debate fiercely while maintaining personal warmth is, honestly, it's something we've largely lost today.
We really have. But before we get into the heart of his philosophy, it is crucial that we establish a firm ground rule for this deep dive.
Yes. Our sources highlight that Chesterton held many distinct, often controversial political and social views that cross modern ideological lines.
Right, he does not fit neatly into any of our modern political boxes.
Not at all. For instance, he was one of the few journalists of his era to staunchly oppose the Boer War. He viewed it as an unjust imperial land grab by the British.
And he fiercely attacked the eugenics movement of his day.
Which is a big one. Now, we need to remember that in the early 1900s, eugenics, which is, the idea of genetically engineering a quote-unquote better human population by controlling who could reproduce, that was considered highly progressive and scientific by the elite.
Yeah, the experts of the day loved it. But Chesterton saw it as a tyrannical assault on the poor and the ordinary family.
He also advocated for a socioeconomic theory called distributism alongside his friend Hilaire Belloc.
Oh, let's define that really quickly, because distributism sounds like, I don't know, wealth redistribution or state socialism, but it wasn't that at all, was it?
No, it was quite the opposite, actually. Distributism was born out of this deep distrust of concentrated power, whether that power was hoarded by a massive central government or by massive corporate monopolies.
So the core idea was that private property is so good that everyone should have some.
Right. It's often summarized by his charmingly rustic phrase, 3 acres and a cow for every person.
3 acres and a cow. I love that.
It was all about decentralized ownership and local economies. Now, I want to assure you, the listener, that our goal today is to impartially report these views as a vital part of the historical and literary record.
Yeah, we are not here to endorse any left-wing or right-wing political sides of today. We're simply trying to convey the ideas exactly as they exist in the original source material, so you can fully understand the mind of the man who wrote them.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have this towering historical figure, a man of massive intellect and fierce convictions, who decides to write a book called Tremendous Trifles.
The very title is a paradox.
Right. A trifle is something small, insignificant, disposable. But he's calling them tremendous.
And the core thesis of this book, the remedy he offers for our modern blindness, is what we might call the romance of ordinary life.
He actually starts the whole book off with a parable in the preface. That's the story of the giant and the pygmy I mentioned at the very beginning.
Yes, the story of two little boys named Peter and Paul who lived in the front garden of a model villa.
Set the scene for us on this because it's so specific.
So Chesterton describes this front garden as being microscopic, like about the size of a dinner table.
Wow.
It has 4 strips of gravel, a square of turf with some cork rockery in the middle, and 1 flower bed with a row of red daisies. It is the absolute epitome of suburban mundanity.
Just totally ordinary.
Right. And one morning, the boys are playing there when a passing milkman, who, Chesterton casually notes in parentheses, happens to be a fairy, leans over the railing and offers them anything they choose to ask for.
I love how he just drops that in. The milkman, who is a fairy. It's so jarring and wonderful. It just completely breaks the fourth wall of modern realism.
It really does. So Paul, the first boy, approaches this with a very businesslike, almost modern consumerist abruptness.
He says he wants to be a giant.
Yes. He wants to stride across continents and oceans and visit Niagara Falls and the Himalayas in a single afternoon stroll.
And the fairy milkman waves his wand, and instantly, Paul is colossal.
But here is the tragedy of Paul. When he steps over to the Himalayas, he finds they are quite small and silly looking, just like the little cork rockery in his front garden.
Oh, man. And when he finds Niagara Falls, it looks no bigger than the tap turned on in his bathroom.
Exactly. He wanders the whole globe for a few minutes, trying to find something really large, finding everything small. And eventually he gets so profoundly bored that he lies down across several prairies and just falls asleep.
And his end is quite darkly comedic, which really shows Chesterton's flair for the absurd.
It really does. So his head lands just outside the hut of an intellectual backwoodsman who happens to be reading a book of neo-Catholic philosophy.
Naturally.
Right, naturally. And the book states, it can be maintained that the evil of pride consists in being out of proportion to the universe.
So the backwoodsman calmly puts down his book, takes his axe, and spends a week cutting the giant's head off.
A severe but salutary history, as Chesterton puts it.
But then we have Peter. Peter makes the exact opposite request. He asks to be a pygmy, about half an inch high.
And immediately he finds himself in the middle of an immense, sprawling plain covered in a tall green jungle, which is, of course, just the grass of his lawn.
Above him rise these strange trees with heads like the sun, with gigantic rays of silver and hearts of gold. The daisies.
The cork rockery becomes a mountain of romantic and impossible shape, like an incident from the end of the world.
So he sets out on an adventure across this endless magical plain, and Chesterton implies he hasn't come to the end of it yet.
The mechanism of this parable is really vital to understand because Chesterton is using a seemingly childish fairy tale to diagnose a very adult, very modern intellectual crisis.
Right. He explicitly states that Peter and Paul represent 2 primary influences upon the modern worldview.
The giant philosophy, which he associates with writers of his time like Rudyard Kipling, is the urge to constantly seek new stimuli.
It's the belief that to feel alive, we must sprawl all over the world, travel to exotic locations, and, just consume geographical variety.
It's essentially the underlying philosophy of the modern travel influencer. The idea that if I just go to Bali or Iceland or Patagonia, then I'll feel awe.
Okay, I need to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because to a modern ear, this sounds a lot like a defense of willful ignorance.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right. Like, isn't traveling and seeing the world actually a necessary thing for building empathy and broadening the mind?
That's a fair point.
If I just follow the pygmy philosophy and only ever stare at my neighbor in his front yard, I'm never going to learn how other cultures solve problems or experience the diversity of the world. It feels like telling someone to only ever eat plain bread when there is a massive international buffet available.
Well, what's fascinating here is that that is a highly justified pushback. And if we read Chesterton merely as an isolationist, we'd be missing his point entirely.
Okay, so he's not just saying stay home.
No, Chesterton isn't against the buffet, and he certainly isn't against empathy. What he's analyzing is the psychology of awe. He's warning about what happens to the human brain on a novelty treadmill.
A novelty treadmill.
Yeah, if you lose the ability to taste the plain bread. If your baseline requirement for feeling a sense of wonder is so high that you need to be standing on the edge of an active volcano in Iceland to feel anything at all, then eventually the buffet won't satisfy you either.
You just build up a tolerance.
Exactly. You become the bored giant Paul finding the Himalayas trivial.
Ah, so it's not geographical, it's psychological.
Precisely. It's about where the magic originates. Does it originate in the object out there or in the eye of the observer?
And Chesterton uses a brilliant metaphor here. Let's grant that a modern man in a standard gray fright coat on a London street is a dull, heart-rending sight.
Right. Very boring.
Kipling's method, the giant's method, is to advise us to go to Central Africa to find a man who doesn't wear a frock coat, to find something visually exotic.
But Chesterton's method is to stare steadily at the civilized man in front of you until you realize the absolute terrifying miracle of the biological, spiritual human being inside the frock coat.
Oh, wow. That completely flips our modern escapism on its head.
It really does.
We spend billions of dollars on travel, on virtual reality, on endless entertainment, trying to escape our standard lives. But he's saying the escape isn't out there. It's in a radical refocusing of our attention right here.
He says if you stare at that man long enough, he might even take off his coat to you, which is a greater compliment than taking off his hat.
That is hilarious. It's about forcing the facts before us to turn into adventures.
The giant wants largeness, but Chesterton points out that the joy of a giant isn't in largeness, but in beholding smallness, in seeing men like insects.
But from the valley, things look large. From the level, things look high.
It's a deliberate subjection of the ego. The giant expands his ego until the universe is small. The pygmy shrinks his ego until the universe is vast.
He wants to sit still and let the marvels and adventures settle on him like flies.
And he famously concludes that section by telling the reader that the world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder.
So if the core problem is this endless, exhausting craving for scale and novelty, what is Chesterton's prescription? How do we actually shrink ourselves down to pygmies?
That brings us to a concept that feels almost blasphemous in our modern, quote-unquote, limitless culture.
The absolute necessity of boundaries.
Exactly. He tackles this in two essays that sound completely absurd on the surface. The advantages of having one leg and the toy theater.
Let's start with the leg, because this is wild. He literally sprains his ankle, is forced to hop around or sit completely still, and instead of complaining about the inconvenience...
Like any normal person would.
Right. He writes a soaring essay about the poetic isolation of standing on one leg.
He does. He compares his one good weight-bearing leg to a solitary Doric column in ancient Greece.
He points out that the legitimate architectural use of a column is to support weight, and now his one leg is fulfilling its ultimate classic function in sublime isolation.
It's very funny, but beneath the humor, there is a profound psychological mechanism at work here. He observes that all pessimism has a secret optimism for its object.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning we only truly realize the beauty, the engineering marvel, and the strength of a foot when we are in sudden danger of losing it.
The way to love anything is to realize that it might be lost. That's a gut punch.
It is. He says if you want to realize the splendid vision of all visible things, wink the other eye.
Limit yourself even for a moment to understand how fearfully and wonderfully you're made. The restriction creates the gratitude.
And he takes this concept that limitation is the source of appreciation and applies it directly to art and creativity in the toy theater.
So in that essay, he talks about playing with a small children's cardboard toy theater.
Yeah.
The kind you could buy back then for a penny plain or 2 pence colored.
Right. You cut out the figures and slide them across the stage.
And he makes a striking sociological point about adulthood and play. He argues that the reason adults don't play with toys isn't because they dislike them or have outgrown them intellectually.
No, it is because playing with toys, as a child does, takes an enormous amount of serious time, energy, and psychic investment.
Yes. He says a child building a tower of wooden bricks is doing serious architectural work in their mind. If the physical tower falls, the child must physically rebuild it.
Whereas an adult writing a book on architecture is doing something fundamentally frivolous by comparison, because if the book is bad, it doesn't physically collapse on his desk.
The child is constrained by the physical limits of the toy and therefore entirely invested in it.
Exactly. And this leads to his grand thesis on creativity. Art is limitation.
The toy theater is magical to Chesterton precisely because it is small and bound by a rigid cardboard frame.
Because the scale is controlled, you can portray the end of the world or the day of judgment inside that little box.
If you tried to portray the end of the world in a real life-size theater, it would just look like bad special effects.
The boundary forces the imagination to do the heavy lifting.
I want to translate this for the listener today because it's exactly how photography
Oh,
works.
that's a great comparison.
If you've ever played around with a good camera, you know that a photograph isn't beautiful because it captures every single thing in a 360-degree radius.
Right. If you just take a wide-angle shot of a busy street, it's a chaotic mess. It's just noise.
The beauty comes from the aperture and the focus. You use a macro lens to blur out the background noise. You choose what to crop out.
The frame, the limitation, is what actually creates the meaning.
Without the frame, there is no art. There's just a data dump.
That is a flawless modern analogy. The human brain simply cannot process infinite data. It requires a frame to find meaning.
And Chesterton scales this idea up from personal art to human societies, doesn't he?
He does. He suggests that large, sprawling empires, like the British Empire of his day, where the sun never set, are inherently prosaic, bureaucratic, and artistically barren.
Because it is beyond human cognitive power to act out a great poem on so vast a scale, you can't feel a deep, poetic connection to an endless bureaucracy.
But small, limited places can produce massive things.
Exactly. Small city-states, like ancient Athens or medieval Florence, produced massive, world-changing philosophies and art.
In the narrow, bounded, highly constrained streets of Florence, Dante felt there was room to map out all of heaven, hell, and purgatory.
Had Dante been a citizen of the sprawling British Empire, Chesterton argues, his imagination would have been stifled by the sheer boring scale of it.
We need borders, we need the frame to understand our world and to create within it.
So if boundaries and frames are the cognitive tools we need to actually see the magic of reality, let's follow Chesterton as he zooms that macro lens in even further.
Let's look at the most immediate, intimate boundaries we interact with daily.
Our own clothes, the things we carry, and the rooms we inhabit. We see this brilliantly in the essay, What I Found in My Pocket.
This essay is practically a masterclass in his method. The setup is highly relatable. He is stuck in a third-class railway carriage on a long journey.
And outside, it is pouring rain, rendering the landscape completely invisible. He has no books, no newspapers. He is completely isolated.
Now, in our time, this is the exact moment someone would pull out a smartphone and start doom scrolling to escape the boredom.
Oh, 100%. But Chesterton, trapped in this carriage, decides to empty his pockets and treat the contents like a newly discovered archaeological site.
He calls it a British Museum in South Kensington collection of unknown curios hung all over him.
He pulls out a pile of Battersea tram tickets. And most of us looking at used transit tickets would just see trash.
But he looks at the printed matter on the back, an ad for some kind of pill, and imagines writing a fierce scientific rejoinder to it.
More profoundly, he sees the tickets as symbols of municipal patriotism. They represent the civic pride of his local area, the physical proof of a community organizing itself to move its citizens.
Then he pulls out a pocket knife.
And through the lens of his imagination, the pocket knife ceases to be a mere piece of metal and becomes a meditation on the entirety of human history.
He sees it as the infant of the sword, the archetype of all human toolmaking. It takes his mind back to the dim, damp, primeval woods, where the first man struck a stone against another to create an edge.
He sees the whole history of iron and steel, the feudal swords of knights, and the massive industrial wheels of modern factories, all conceptually contained in that small, folded blade in his hand.
Then he pulls out a box of matches, which he calls the fierce, ancient female magic of fire, a thing stronger than steel that we all love but dare not touch.
He finds a coin and sees all government and order since the world began stamped onto a piece of copper. He finds an entire universe in his pocket.
But it's what happens when he steps out into the wider world, equipped with these pockets, that gives us one of his most famous, most beautifully written essays, A Piece of Chalk.
A Piece of Chalk is truly a masterpiece of sensory writing and philosophical pivoting.
He describes setting out on the Great Sussex Downs, these massive, rolling green hills in southern England, intending to draw.
He explicitly chooses to bring brown paper, which he loves because it represents to him the primal twilight of the first toil of creation.
It's not a blank, sterile white void. It has texture and history.
Right. He wants to use bright, vivid chalks to pick out points of fire in the brown paper, like the first stars in the twilight.
He sits down to draw the soul of a cow, which he imagines as purple and silver with 7 horns because, well, why not?
Because it's Chesterton.
Exactly. And he reaches into his pockets. He searches all those universe-containing pockets we just talked about, and he can't find the most crucial piece of equipment.
He forgot his white chalk.
He sits there in absolute despair, miles from any shop. He feels that without white, his pictures are as pointless as a world without good people.
He needs the white to make the highlights, to make the picture pop. But then he stands up and roars with immense booming laughter.
He realizes the joke is on him. He is sitting on an immense geological warehouse of white chalk.
The entire landscape of southern England, the very hill he is resting his brown paper on, is made of chalk.
He doesn't need a tiny stick from a shop. He just breaks a piece off the ground beneath his feet and starts drawing.
But Chesterton never just stops at the physical anecdote. The transition he makes from that physical realization to moral theology is seamless.
He realizes that white is not an absence of color. White is a fierce, blazing, positive color.
Just as white chalk is required to draw the brightest, most affirmative stars on the dark brown paper, he argues that virtue goodness itself is not merely the absence of vice.
This is a crucial, foundational point for his entire worldview, and it pushes back against a very weary, restrictive sort of puritanism.
Right. He argues that chastity is not the absence of sex. It is a flaming, positive passion like Joan of Arc.
Mercy is not the absence of cruelty. It is a plain, positive, burning thing like the sun.
He is completely overturning the pessimistic, rule-following idea that being good just means avoiding bad things. Goodness is active. It is blazing white. It requires immense energy.
So if goodness requires this blazing, active, creative choice, it completely changes how we view everything else we do, even how we rest.
And that logically brings us to a hilarious but biting essay called On Lying in Bed.
Chesterton laments that modern ceilings are blank and boring, and he wishes he had a long pencil to draw on them, or could paint them with the bristly end of a broom.
But beyond his desire for ceiling frescoes, he issues a very strict warning about the act of lying in bed.
Yes. He asks us to deeply consider why we stay in bed. He is violently against having a good, healthy reason for it.
Right. He says if you lie in bed, you should do it for no reason at all.
Which is such a contrarian thing to say.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener today because we live in the era of hustle culture and biohacking.
Oh, yeah.
We have Aura rings, sleep trackers, and 10-step morning routines. If we take a nap, we have to justify it by calling it, non-sleep deep rest for optimal neuroplasticity.
It has to have a metric.
Right. So why is Chesterton so terrified of having a good, healthy reason for staying in bed? What is the actual danger there?
The danger is the modern obsession with placing minor hygiene above major morals.
Okay, explain that.
Well, if you justify your rest by saying, it's for my health, my doctor recommended it, it optimizes my heart rate variability, you are binding yourself to a mechanical, utilitarian rule.
You risk becoming a hypochondriac, constantly surveilling your own physical state.
Exactly. Treating yourself like a machine to be tuned rather than a soul to be nourished.
You lose your freedom.
Completely. Chesterton believes that leisure, true rest, must be a completely free, creative, rebellious choice.
It is the difference between a miser getting up early to obsessively hoard gold and a free man choosing to stay in bed simply because he delights in the absolute freedom to do so.
Our minor actions when we sleep, what we eat, should be flexible and creative, while our major principles, truth, justice, honor, remain unchangeable.
The modern world, he argues, has it entirely backward. Our moral principles shift with the wind, but our daily routines and health metrics are rigid, tyrannical dogmas.
We've completely lost that free, unstructured wonder. We demand that every minute be justified by a productivity or health metric.
Now, adults struggle with this, but children possess this freedom natively.
Yes, children know the world is wild, flexible, and fundamentally magical.
And that leads directly into his passionate, almost aggressive defense of fairy tales, specifically in an essay called The Dragon's Grandmother.
In that essay, Chesterton encounters a young man with a green tie and a very long neck. Chesterton hilariously speculates the man might be evolving the neck of a giraffe so he can comfortably eat the tops of the trees in Kensington Gardens.
I love his casual roasts. So this hyper-rational young man claims that fairy tales shouldn't be read to children because they are demonstrably false and they frighten them.
And Chesterton absolutely erupts at this idea.
He privately exercises the man. He says it's easier to believe in Bluebeard than to believe in a man who doesn't like fairy tales.
But the core of his argument isn't just about preserving childish innocence. It's deeply psychological, and he expands on it in another essay called The Red Angel.
Right. A lady wrote to him saying it was cruel to tell children about buoys and goblins because it introduces the concept of fear.
And Chesterton argues that the fairy tale does not give the child the idea of fear. The child already has it.
Precisely. A child sitting in the dark can invent more horrors, more shapeless, nameless terrors than any storybook could ever print.
The fear of the unknown, the fear of the dark, the fear of death, these are innate in the human soul because the universe is, frankly, an alarming and dangerous place.
If you keep the specific goblins out of the nursery, the child will just project that innate terror onto the shadows on the wall.
What the fairy tale provides is not the fear. The fairy tale provides the cure for the fear.
This is so relevant for parents today who try to sanitize everything. It's like saying we shouldn't teach kids about firefighters because it implies that houses can burn down.
That's a really good way to look at it.
The child inherently knows the world is dangerous. The fairy tale gives them the heroism to face it. It gives the baby a St. George to kill the dragon.
It provides a clear conceptual picture that limitless terrors actually have a limit, that shapeless enemies have enemies in the Knights of God.
You can't defeat a shapeless anxiety, but you can chop the head off a dragon.
He uses the Grimm's tale of the boy who could not shudder. The story is packed with horrific imagery, severed legs, walking down a chimney, ghosts playing bowling with skulls.
But the point of the story isn't the horror. The point is that the hero is not frightened by it.
He slaps the bogies on the back. He maintains his sanity in a world of monsters.
And this raises an incredibly important critique Chesterton makes about modern literature, which he contrasts sharply with the architecture of fairy tales.
Right. He looks at the contemporary fiction of his day, and honestly, this applies to our prestige TV and literature right now.
Oh, entirely. He mentions a stack of modern realistic books with hypothetical titles like Psychological Sue, A Tale of Suburbia.
He points out that modern fiction takes insanity as its center. The modern hero is psychologically broken, neurotic, cynical, or mad, while the world around him is a dull, steady, cruel, unyielding routine.
The hero is sick in a boring world.
But in the fairy tale, the dynamic is the exact opposite. The fairy tale takes sanity as its unmovable center.
The hero, the youngest son, the woodcutter's daughter, is brave, reasonable, keeps their promises, and acts entirely normally.
It is the world around them that goes mad. Pumpkins turn into coaches, mice turn into horses, blue moons rise, and two-headed giants attack.
It is the perfectly sane hero navigating a wild, unpredictable cosmos.
And this isn't just literary criticism. This is the philosophical bedrock that quietly prepares the way for his magnum opus, Orthodoxy, which he published around the same time.
He is proving that a joyful, fighting faith, a core of sanity and gratitude, is the only rational response to a universe that is fundamentally wild, mysterious, and full of marvels.
But this raises the big question. What happens when adults abandon this childlike sanity? What happens when we convince ourselves that the dull, material world is all there is and that it controls us?
When we lose that sanity, we start getting the mechanics of reality entirely backward.
Chesterton illustrates this beautifully in The Wind and the Trees. He describes being in Battersea Park on a very blustery day.
The trees are tossing and lashing about violently in the wind.
He knows a little boy, about 4 years old, who is getting increasingly frustrated because the wind keeps blowing his hat off. Finally, the boy looks at his mother and says, "Well, why don't you take away the trees?" And then it wouldn't wind.
The kid thought the trees caused the wind by waving their branches, because it's the only visible movement he could see.
It is an entirely innocent, perfectly understandable, empirical mistake for a child to make.
Right, for a 4-year-old.
But Chesterton uses it to deliver a devastating critique of modern intellectuals. He says this 4-year-old's mistake is the exact heresy of modern sociologists, economists, and politicians.
They look at society and believe that material circumstances, the trees, create moral and spiritual movements.
The wind, Let's break this down because this is probably his most piercing critique of the 20th and 21st centuries.
He says the wind is the invisible, spirit philosophy, religion, revolution, human motivation. The trees are the visible institutions, cities, laws, material conditions, economics.
We only know there is a wind because the trees go mad.
We only know there is a revolution in the minds of men because the chimney pots go mad on the skyline. The battle always happens in the invisible sky before it happens on the material earth.
But the modern expert looks at the shaking trees and says, the trees are moving the wind.
Precisely. The materialist argues that poverty directly creates the desire to drink, or that economics alone dictate the flow of human history.
Marx argued that material conditions entirely dictate human consciousness.
But Chesterton argues that treating the human mind as a mere helpless accident of its environment smashes all possibility of serious change or human dignity.
If our circumstances make us completely stupid and determined, how can we even trust our own minds to know we are right in altering those circumstances?
He points out that the true cause often lies in the invisible spirit. For instance, a spiritual lack of civic dignity or hope might be the invisible root cause that produces both the material poverty and the drunkenness.
He sees this upside-down thinking, this idea that humans must adapt to systems rather than systems adapting to humans everywhere.
He calls it topsy-turvy land. He gives a great example. He's walking down Fleet Street and sees a vivid violet poster advertising a debate or an article. The poster asks a question, should shop assistants marry?
It's a question that stops him in his tracks because of its profound arrogance.
I can literally hear modern productivity gurus or Silicon Valley CEOs asking this exact question today.
Oh, without a doubt.
Well, it's a valid economic inquiry about workplace efficiency. We need to know if family life negatively impacts retail output or our Q4 margins.
But to Chesterton, this isn't just bad economics. It's pure, terrifying insanity, isn't it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the ultimate horrific triumph of materialism over humanity.
Chesterton points out that marriage is a primal, sacred, epic human institution. It is the foundation of the human race.
The modern department store, on the other hand, is a temporary, highly artificial commercial arrangement.
Instead of asking if the modern shop is structured in a way that is worthy of the sacred institution of marriage, the materialists ask if Adam and Eve are suitable for employment at Marshall and Snellgrove.
They are judging the eternal massive end by the temporary petty means.
He suggests other absurd upside-down questions based on this logic. Do feet improve boots? Is cleanliness good for soap?
It's completely backwards. The slave shouldn't ask, am I worthy of these chains? The slave should ask, are these chains worthy of me?
We see this today with the gig economy or algorithmic management in warehouses.
We don't ask, does this technology serve human flourishing? We ask, how can we optimize the human worker to better serve the algorithm?
It is the exact same heresy of the wind and the trees. And because the so-called experts, the economists, the sociologists, the politicians get everything so fundamentally upside down, Chesterton argues that a sane society must ultimately bypass the experts and rely on the ordinary, untrained person to see the truth.
Which brings us to his brilliant analysis of the justice system in the essay The 12 Men.
Chesterton finds himself called to jury duty in Battersea. As he sits in the jury box, he looks around at the courtroom ecosystem, the judge in his robes, the sharp lawyers, the seasoned police officers.
And he realizes a terrifying truth. These legal professionals, despite all their extensive training and expertise, don't really see the prisoner in the dock anymore.
They've lost the ability to see the human tragedy. They just see the usual man in the usual place.
And here, Chesterton drops one of his greatest, most enduring paradoxes. He says, the more a man looks at a thing, the less he can see it. And the more a man learns a thing, the less he knows it.
That sounds crazy at first. How can learning more make you know less?
But he's talking about the psychology of habituation, isn't he?
He is. The professionals have become totally accustomed to the horror of the courtroom, the destruction of a man's life, the weeping of a family, the cold machinery of the state. To the judge and the lawyer, this isn't a tragedy. It's Tuesday.
It's just their daily grind.
Their expertise has created a callous blindness. Therefore, Chesterton argues, civilization, in its profound ancient instinct, hands life and death decisions not to the hardened experts, but to 12 ordinary, untrained people pulled randomly from the street.
It's the exact opposite of the modern push for specialization, where we demand a credentialed expert for every aspect of life.
Yes. Chesterton says when you want a library cataloged or a knee surgically repaired, use a specialist.
But when you want something truly serious done, like determining the moral guilt or innocence of a human soul. You need the untrained ordinary person.
Why? Precisely because they are not used to it. The jury sees the courtroom, the wasted faces, the complex legal arguments with fresh, shocked, horrified eyes.
They bring the light of the street into the dark, mechanical machinery of the law. They can still feel the terror of the situation.
And this desperate need to be shocked into seeing reality applies just as much to our daily personal lives.
We get stuck in our own routines, our own habitual blindness. He writes about 2 incidents in cabs that jolt him awake.
In The Extraordinary Cabman, he gets into an intense argument with a cab driver about where he was originally picked up.
The cabman insists it was Euston Station. Chesterton knows for a fact it was Leicester Square.
What's fascinating here is how Chesterton describes the psychological toll of the argument.
The cabman is so sincere, so ponderously honest in his incorrect memory, that for a split second, Chesterton's own sanity rocks on its foundations.
He experiences the nightmare of the philosophical skeptic. What if reality isn't what I think it is? How do I know my own past is real? What if I am the crazy one?
It's that terrifying moment of solipsism.
But he chooses sanity. He refuses to be a lunatic. He holds on to the reality of Leicester Square.
And then the cabman suddenly remembers he was wrong and apologizes. But that momentary shock, that threat to his reality, forces Chesterton to grip his own existence much more tightly.
It gets even more intense physically in the essay, An Accident.
He is in a hansom cab tearing down the Strand in London, and the horse slips, loses the reins, and they are hurtling out of control toward a massive motor omnibus.
In those agonizing moments before the violent crash, Chesterton doesn't experience the cliché of his whole life flashing before his eyes.
Instead, his mind rapidly cycles through the fundamental philosophies of human history in a matter of seconds.
First, he experiences pure paganism, which he defines in that moment simply as extreme, raw fear of the elements, the terror of the gods of the street.
Then, his mind shifts to Stoicism, a cold, empty, fatalistic acceptance of whatever happens, a detachment from the pain.
If I die, I die. The universe moves on.
Exactly. But finally, at the literal moment of physical impact, he experiences a state of mind that he identifies uniquely as Christianity.
It is a sudden, powerful, blazing realization that things mattered very much indeed.
It wasn't that his life was unimportant, as the Stoic would say, but that it was undeniably real, vital, and infinitely valuable.
He crawls out from under the wrecked, splintered cab, dusting himself off, completely unharmed but deeply shaken.
And he looks around at the London street, and he realizes how we sleepwalk through our modern routines.
We are living what you might call hurried living.
We are so distracted, so focused on efficiency, on getting to the next meeting, on checking our phones, that we only wake up to the absolute majesty and terror of existence when we are forced to sit on a jury judging a murder, or when our cab violently crashes into a bus.
Those essays beautifully and tragically diagnose that hurried living.
Chesterton watches the men in a quick lunch restaurant, taking their food so fast it has no quality of food, and taking their leisure so fast it has no quality of leisure.
They're entirely bound by the heavy ticking chain of their pocket watches. They are surviving, but they are not alive.
We need to be jolted awake. But Chesterton's ultimate, beautiful point in Tremendous Trifles is that we don't actually need a literal car crash to wake up. We don't need a tragedy to force us to see.
We just need to learn to look at our immediate surroundings as if we've just crash-landed on a foreign planet.
That's why this book is the absolute perfect introduction to Chesterton for new readers.
It's not heavy theology. It doesn't require a degree in Thomistic philosophy to understand.
It is simply a pair of magical spectacles that you put on, and suddenly the boring, gray, hyper-efficient modern world bursts into vivid, terrifying color.
It proves that gratitude and attention are the highest human virtues.
It is the daily practice of seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary.
It is the realization that the world is a wild, fantastic, magical place, and it is only our own dullness, our own giant-like boredom that makes it seem mundane.
So to fulfill the promise of this deep dive, we decided to do a little exercise. We challenged each other to take the Tremendous Trifle test.
After rereading this book, we each had to pick one completely ordinary thing from our daily routine that we now see entirely differently through Chesterton's spectacles.
I'll go first. I was walking down my street the other day, staring at my phone as usual, and I forced myself to stop and look at a standard wooden telephone pole.
Okay, the most boring thing possible.
Normally, it's just a piece of ugly city infrastructure, a splintery cylinder blocking the sidewalk, covered in old staples. But applying the pygmy perspective, isolating it in a frame, I saw it for what it really is, a slain tree. It was pulled from the earth, stripped of its living branches, and now it stands there, dead, holding up invisible lightning electricity to connect human voices across the globe.
That is wild.
It is a dead giant holding the power of the gods in its hands just so I can order a pizza. It's wildly poetic.
That is a perfect application of the perspective. For my part, I looked at my morning coffee mug.
Let's hear it.
Typically, it is just a mechanical caffeine delivery system. I don't look at it, I just use it. But looking closely, I realized it is a piece of the earth itself, molded clay, forged in the fire of a kiln.
Oh,
Inside it, it holds boiling water and the ground-up, roasted seeds of a plant grown thousands of miles away across an ocean.
yeah, that takes a lot to coordinate.
Exactly. It requires a massive global alliance of humanity farmers in Colombia, sailors on cargo ships, truck drivers, potters, all working in concert just so I can take a warm sip in my kitchen at 7 a.m.
It is a staggering miracle of human cooperation held in the palm of your hand.
It really is.
Once you start seeing the world this way, once you realize that every object around you has a cosmic history, you can't stop. You can never be bored again.
This raises an important question, and it is the thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. Think back to the boy in Battersea Park, watching the wind and the trees.
Right.
If the wind is the invisible spirit, our beliefs, our morals, our unseen motivations, and the trees are our material institutions, our jobs, our politics, our daily routines. What are the trees in your life right now that are shaking violently?
And more importantly, what is the invisible wind that is actually moving them? Are you treating the symptoms or are you looking at the spirit?
That is definitely something to chew on.
Remember, as Chesterton taught us, the world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder. Thank you for pulling up a chair and spending this time with us in the common room. Keep your eyes open, and we'll see you next time.